We'll never be moved from here. Our lives can live in the seeds we've sown.
Welcome to the Art of Relating podcast, where I'm figuring out life, asking questions, becoming present with the unknown, and navigating the mystery with my dear friends. These conversations are one of my greatest resources, and I hope they can be a catalyst for you on your journey as well. I'm your host, Tammy Chow from Somatic Spirit.
All of this planted deep for the ones to come.
So I met Zori recently on my spontaneous trip to Guatemala, where I stayed in San Marcos for 3 weeks. And I've always heard about circling. And I went to one of her workshops where she and I just dropped in for like 2.5 hours in space of such deep presence. And this practice really profoundly impacted me. And I couldn't help but continue to go every Friday and also try to see how I could continue to have Zori in my sphere. Because I felt such a beautiful connection and warmth with her. And on we went for dinner one night in San Marcos. And I don't know. Oh, yeah, we got to it by talking about sometimes in the context of circling when it's between male and female, that inevitably the conversation of attraction naturally comes up, and how you get to kind of explore that in a space of honesty and presence without guessing. And I found that so fascinating that, for me at least, I was never taught how to do that in the context of real life dating. And also how I'm just speaking from my experience. I can't say for everybody's, but in my experience, it's felt like I, as a woman, have been conditioned to just be as attractive as possible and appear as smart and as sweet and funny and caring as possible in order to attract a man. And at some point we mate, sorry, not like have babies, but at some point we hook up, right? Like making out inevitably leads to, it seems like there's supposed to be some end goal of sleeping together, which then turns into, well, are we in a relationship or not? And then it's just like combustion after combustion of so much confusion. And so for the first time in my life, I'm finally taking a step back and consciously dating and assessing my options with several people, with more context of understanding attachment styles now, more looking for what's suited for me rather than seeing who will like me. And it's not that I haven't dated several people before, but it used to be, I think, in a much more unconscious place of, this is what I'm supposed to do in New York. I'm just supposed to see a bunch of people and nobody talks or tells anybody anything, or even expresses what their agendas are. And it's all very painful and confusing. And so I had a really nourishing conversation with Zori, who, of course, I feel like you always meet people who are on a similar path at the right time, who had a very, it seems, similar dating history and has more recently started navigating this path. And I feel like on topics like this, navigating relationships or sexuality or all kinds of nuanced things, I feel like my only resources are Reddit feeds or Instagram or TikTok. It's hard to find which books to know how to dive into. And to be honest, I just really wish I could have conversations with a lot of people and ask them, what the hell do you do when you're dating several people? Like, do you feel like you're doing something wrong? So that's the intention for today's conversation, is just two friends connecting, talking about something that maybe other friends talk to each other about. And I know that I would benefit from more just having access to more conversations like these, because I don't think there is a right or wrong. I think it's for everybody to figure out on their own, but it does help to just have context and see how other people navigate the trials and tribulations that come along with figuring out how to consciously date several people in a way that feels good for you and for the other people. So, welcome, Zori. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I really appreciate the beautiful context that you set for our conversation, and yeah, just feeling a lot of connection and resonance with you, and yeah, also a feeling of celebration, I would say, of of this way in which I feel you're finding things out as you go, and you're allowing
Yeah.
yourself to evolve with what life is bringing you, with the experience you're having, and seeing, okay, this is not working and I'm going to try something else. And somehow I feel eventually, you spoke about where do we go, where do we look for answers. For me it kind of feels like there's this movement of, like I can listen to different people, and it definitely helps me with perspectives. And I really hope that our conversation today serves people in that way. And at the same time, it's kind of like, how much can I really meet what I'm experiencing in my life and allow myself to evolve through that and to find my way through that, rather than looking for like, oh, this is the formula that we apply now for dating
Totally.
or for relationships.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I think that's why I'm drawn to more of this conversational type of format of a quote unquote podcast. But it's even like almost just offering different options, right? Like if I only know how to date one way, at least if I just listen to the way other people do it, I can try them all out and see how they feel for me. But without anything out, like any other options, I feel like I'm in this freeze state. I feel like a little girl again, like I'm 4 years old, like desperately just like not wanting to do the wrong thing. um, but yeah, so I'm excited to talk to you about your experience. I guess would it help for me to kind of update you on where I am right now?
I'd love to hear that.
So right now, like I said, I'm taking deliberate time to date around, which I usually tend to rush right into a relationship because I think I tend to get intimate with people very quickly, since that's kind of my world where I'm just like, what's your attachment style and trauma? Let's just get as deep as possible. It's hard for me to know how to relate or know how to be intimate otherwise. Which I'm curious too, like, is there some formula for maybe we could be casual for the first few times we meet or something? I don't know. But right now I have two potential, what should we call them? Two, uh, two dates. Yeah, two potential daters, where, in the past, my worldview was that love is scarce, right? That I just feel like nobody ever liked me. And so I would just latch on to the first attractive, semi-emotionally there person, and that would turn into a long relationship. And I've done so much work that I'm like stunned to find myself now in a position where two people that I'm very attracted to are even attracted to me. And so I've never really been in this place of, it feels like, not quote power, but like I've never been in a place where I feel like I have choice. But right now I have somebody who I met in San Marcos that I had a very, the time that I was there, we were probably intimate for the week, and are still talking and are very much connected. And honestly, I feel like I'm being met emotionally in a way that I haven't ever been before. And then with someone else, I had gone on 2 dates with them before I left for Guatemala for the month, and then came back and just saw them again. And they're also, it's interesting. It's like one of those situations where on paper, this seems like so well suited. Um, but yeah, now I'm in this weird bind almost. It just feels like I'm being torn left and right and I'm doing something wrong. I think with the person in San Marcos, there's a lot of more clear communication because I feel like very connected and we're deeply emotionally talking in that way. And so I brought up the other day, how much do you want to know about me dating other people? Like how much, do you want to know if I go on a date? And he sort of said, well, I'm more hurt by the idea of our trust being destroyed. Like I think our trust is the most important thing. And he said, what hurts me the most is if I feel like I'm on the outside with you and I want to be on the inside. So I don't want to feel you withdrawing and having me guess like, what did I do wrong? I'd rather you tell me what you're doing. And then on my side, of course, like that all sounds so beautiful and wonderful to navigate life in that way. But I'm noticing really big body contractions in doing this because it reminds me of when I was like a teenager and I would cheat and create all of this drama and lose love. I kind of created a lot of turmoil because that's just my understanding of love back then. And so it's so interesting because it feels like I'm doing something wrong. And I find myself even stalling, to be honest, even though that's the agreement. And I even said to him, I'm scared that if I'm honest, that you'll go away. And that's really like the core fear, So yeah, I'm just curious what comes up for you.
Yeah, what comes up for me hearing you is that I can definitely relate to this experience of what happens if actually I want to take my time before diving deeper with somebody, and the fact that that opens space for such situations in which you might be actually seeing several people at the same time, because it might take you even months before you decide whether or not you want to continue with somebody. So then all of that time, it makes sense that you know at least until you feel it, you can stay open to meet others. But then it's like, at least for me, and I hear for you too, there's all of this like kind of contraction of like, oh my god, but like, how do I navigate that, and how will everybody feel? And especially, at least for me, it feels like one of my core values is authenticity, right? So so I know for me it's important to reveal. It's kind of like, I've been in situations where the other person, for example, hasn't wanted to know things that I might reveal to them, not necessarily in this context, but like, I've been in those kinds of situations, and I've seen that like, actually, that in itself is enough to tell me I don't want to be around that person, I don't want to be close with,
Oh,
because
wow. I
actually
didn't
I can't
even
be
think of that.
myself. I can't be honest with them. And then it's kind of like, well, that's a core value, and I want that in my relating. So it's not just about what they want, it's also about what I'm looking for. And
You just blew my mind.
yeah, so it's just, yeah, really appreciating hearing you navigating a similar kind of dynamic. I'm curious what blew your mind, you said.
I think you having witnessed me encircling, like, that my tendency is to jump outside of myself and cater to the other, right? Like, growing up with an alcoholic father who I was very much emotionally managing since the age of 4, which is almost like a life or death thing, because if he dies, I'm dead. Who's going to take care of me? So I'm constantly like, how are you doing? What are you like? How can I get you something so that you're okay? And that's my tendency with men, especially. And so the fact that you see, like with the other person who I haven't even broached this topic with about like, hey, I'm seeing several people. I'm still in my mind being like, well, when's the right time to even bring this up? Or maybe I shouldn't bring it up until he does, because it's all in an effort to not make them upset so that they don't go away. But what you just said was mind blowing, because obviously if I bring it up and they can't be in this dance with me, then like we don't really have much left to do.
Mm-hmm. If authenticity and honesty is important to you, because I've actually, had these conversations with friends for whom it's like there could be, for example, that somebody had an evening out with someone, or they even slept with them, or whatever happened, and it's kind of like um, almost like an unspoken agreement that these are things that we don't share with each other. We can do them, but just don't speak about them. So it's like there's people that navigate relationships like that, and I don't know how it works exactly, because it just doesn't work for me. you know um, for me it's kind of like, well, a core component of a relationship, of intimacy, for me is trust and safety, and that is built through revealing what's happening for us, and trusting each other, trusting that even if something not so nice is going on, we will know about it, you know because then it's like you have information with which to work, of like what's happening between us, and you have a shared reality. If you don't have that, like, for me it's very, very difficult to navigate it.
Yeah, well, I have two questions from that. I guess one is, how early on, say you are already seeing one person or two people, and then you meet somebody else, how many dates, getting to know them, do you think that you would bring this up?
I feel like it's an interesting question, and I don't have like like an answer that's like, yeah, on the third day,
Yeah.
and 30
Right.
minutes in 30 minutes in. um yeah, I feel like yeah, it's just kind of feeling into also each other's intentions, because it's for me, that's one thing I feel like bringing here. Like, when I meet a man, like, I don't necessarily have this idea of like, okay, I'm going on a date, or like I'm going out dating. Like, just my personal trajectory with those kinds of things is more like, oh, i I just go out with this person, and and just like I would with another friend, and because there's clearly like a nice dynamic between us or something, and we want to get to know each other or something like that, but I don't have it in my mind like, oh, this is a date, we're starting to look at each other in that way. I have it more as, yeah, that's just two people getting to know each other, and I can acknowledge, for example, well, if attraction is there for me, and I don't know if it's there for them until they share that. So it's kind of like, it's interesting, because like this whole concept of dating is not something that is easily there for me, and is part of my history. Like, it wasn't there. I grew up in Bulgaria. I like, dating was not a word I used. It's like, oh, I'm just going out meeting a guy. It's like, so it's kind of like, yeah, for me that's part of the difficulty also of navigating this, because it's like, well, who am I dating? It's like, and when can I say I'm dating
Right.
somebody in order to have to reveal that to somebody else? I guess like, for me it's more about, well, I can acknowledge when there is attraction on my side, or attraction from the other side that is being shared, And when that happens, for example, with more than one person, then it's like, okay, there's conversations here to be had with both of them. That's how I feel, and that's how I approach it.
And do you feel like you're usually the one that brings it up first?
um I'm not the one that brings up the attraction first usually. um but if I am in a circumstance where there is somebody else that that I'm seeing, that I have an attraction to, um, I will probably bring that up, even if the other is not asking or not speaking about their experience with that. But it's not something I'm experiencing, all the time. It's like, I just remember we were speaking with you that it came up for you and it had come up for me just like a few weeks earlier. Um, yeah,
Well, yeah, I just feel like in the States, the dating thing is real, especially with apps, right? Like that, I mean, in San Marcos, it might be different because it's so much more organic, which is maybe why I feel a lot more comfortable with the dater in San Marcos, because it evolved organically and hanging out, as friends until it was more romantic, versus here where we met up first from an app. So it's like a first date, then it's a second date, then it's a third date. And yeah, there is something so tiring and weird and like unnatural about it. So it puts me in this weird bind of, okay, it's going really well. But yeah, again, that fear of stating, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm dating several people, of, that fear of like them then not being interested, I guess. Or, yeah, I don't know.
yeah. I hear you. And I want to appreciate the transparency of intention that the dating word brings, and that this approach brings. And at the same time, for me, it's like it's very difficult to navigate a relationship with such a kind of like, oh, this is what we're here for. And if that doesn't work, I'm not interested in anything with you. And like for me, it's like very outcome driven, and that is like, I don't know, it just takes away something of the way that I would like to approach relationships, which is much more emergent, much more like, oh, I'm feeling like drawn here and I'm feeling a good energy here, and I'm just going to go that way and see where that takes me with this person. And it's not necessarily, you know so many times it has happened that I go like this towards somebody, and maybe there is some attraction, and maybe something happens, or maybe something doesn't happen, and eventually like we end up doing something completely different, or being friends, or creating a project together, like, so it's kind of really looking at each other in that wider context of, two human beings just being drawn to connect with each other, and following that thread, whatever it takes them.
Right. And I think that's why the conversation of poly has been, well, that was like at one point for me and my partner of 6 years, a big conversation. And just reading into that world, I think it brings a lot of richness around that, around less rigidity, around defining things, I think, at first, and letting things be allowed and evolve. But I guess just as you're speaking, it's almost like the way that I can approach, say, the person that I met online, to bring in more of this, because it's not his fault and it's not my fault. It's just the way that it's set up, that from an app, it puts this weird pressure cooker on it where there's less communication. And I actually feel like, yeah, I've been kind of thinking in my head that it's more about the partners. Like, partner in San Marcos makes me feel like I could be my full self, while partner here, I feel like I have to be a version of myself. But it may not be just about the people. It may be about the context in which we've met. And so I wonder if I can and because the partner in San Marcos, we went to circling, we communicated in the context of that aliveness of being with what's here right now and being radically honest. So it's almost like I could just maybe try bringing that in to the one here and seeing how it might evolve, and if it's still not as open and as expansive, then I kind of have my answer, I guess, for whether it's a match for me or not.
Yeah, this is bringing up something else for me that's an interesting kind of thread I've been watching, which is like, for example, yes, in that situation, it is your choice to reveal more of yourself and see how that affects the relationship, where what happens, how the other responds, and that's definitely part of the dance of deepening and connecting and building intimacy. And for me, one of the things I've noticed with somebody that right now I'm actually collaborating with, that also had this thread at some point of like there was some attraction and things like that between us. It was so powerful to actually be with a man that was leading in that vulnerability, that was leading in with the courage to reveal what's happening for him. And somehow through that, I felt like it was creating more safety for me to do that. And it felt so relieving to my system that, okay, like, I don't have to, try and bring myself in like piece by piece, and all of that somebody else is on that same journey, and I can see it through their actions. And then it's kind of like, oh, okay. It's kind of bringing up this question for me of like, yeah, when in a situation like this, yeah, of course I can choose to reveal, but also like, what am I looking for in terms of the other person, and their courage to reveal themselves too, and how is that being, you know reflected in that situation.
Yeah, that's I think ideally that's what I am looking for, right? And then I mean, my whole theme in my work and in my dating right now is I don't have to work so hard, where all of my upbringing and need for safety would have wired me otherwise, right? So then I go into relationships in the past, expending so much of myself, saving them, giving so much just to keep love, and also based on what I witnessed growing up with my parents. But yeah, and so then is it like, in order to attract or make sure that it's the right person, that I would hold back and be kind of not even bring anything to the table
Yeah, it's kind of like
to see how they show up?
yeah, I hear you. And for me, it kind of feels like, the answer should not be that we hold back. I feel like there's just dynamics that arise between two people which make it easy to be ourselves. And then dynamics that make it harder. And then it's kind of like,
And would you name that if you're in a dynamic where you find that it's hard to be yourself, just to see if that could open up to something?
yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, like, it's there for a reason. If I find myself in such a situation, it's there for a reason for me to, dare and have the courage to speak and to show myself as I am. Um, so we can still take that opportunity to learn and grow, and at the same time be very mindful of like, yeah, and like, if that continues to be, the way, and I feel like I keep on needing to, you know try hard to bring myself in, or to reveal something, maybe that's not the right dynamic for me with another.
Right. I guess what's coming for me is almost like if I was listening to this conversation, I'd want to have almost an example of what it's like to bring that up within a relationship. And so, like, if we were to just workshop me and this person here, right? Like, this is just me speaking without their presence. I feel like this person is on paper kind of like the kind of guy that I would pedestalize, like in high school and college, the kind of guy that I assume would like other girls that are more established and prettier and, and cooler than me. And so there is some element of being somewhat intimidated by him or feeling like I need to fit something that he is looking for, even though I am looking for somebody who could meet me in my full depths. And I feel like completely powerful in that when I'm not in his presence. But then the second I'm in his presence, for whatever reason, I feel like one eighth of me is there, even though I like allude to and talk about all of these things. Yeah, I just find myself holding, and I find like there's like an anxiousness in my chest. And I feel like he has asked me a lot, or like I've talked a lot about my history and trauma and everything, but I don't feel like he's offered much. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because I've said I'm not trying to fix anybody anymore. I don't want to attract men who could be more my client than my partner. um, but I kind of want to know, I don't, he's almost like so good at being sensual that it triggers my fear of when a man is like too smooth, because I'm like, like you do this with all, every woman, or how to do this, how to be physically intimate in such a good way. But I'm not met yet emotionally for my body to even feel my heart to feel open, even though it's like I find myself going along with the motions. But yeah, so that's where I'm at, I guess. And where I was thinking of opening up the conversation was something along the lines of, because I'm picking up that he might be a little bit avoidant, have avoidant tendencies. And so I think what I was gonna say was, I feel like I've shared a lot of my self and my inner world, and I have a desire to get to hear more of yours before I feel more safe to open up intimately, like before we progress intimately, I guess.
Yeah, I would just hearing you say that, I'm just very mindful of like this little light that went in my head, that's like before we progress and before we go intimate. It's like it's already
Right.
like, if you give me this, I'll give you that, and like
Yeah.
and I'm just like, don't do that. Like, just as your friend, I'm like,
Yes.
don't offer yourself just for some piece of information, like just
Yes, you're right.
like there's something of like, yeah, inviting him to share, but then maybe also like being, checking in with yourself, if it's true that if he would do that, you would go further, and if it isn't, then just being honest about that, like, hey, like, I'm definitely here, I'm definitely interested in continuing to explore and seeing where this goes between us. I can't guarantee where it's gonna go, like, because we're still getting to know each other. And, you know, and in that context, like somehow, okay, I'm interested to know more about you. Like, just as something of like not tying that to an outcome.
Totally. Thank you so much for pointing that out. And that was a big pattern in the past, right? So much of I'm sure, like a lot of people who follow me, I talk a lot about sexual trauma and journeying through that. And right now I'm in a container where I'm being witnessed by 8 women unpacking like a very, just a clusterfuck of relational assault, in my life that I feel like I haven't pieced apart in this way. And so that has been a very confusing part, is the ways that I've given my body up in efforts to survive or to not be abandoned. So thank you so much for picking up on that. This is why I'm starting to talk to more friends and listening to more friends in my dating life because it's so easy to be caught up in my trauma vortex. Like, I don't know right from wrong. It's been so valuable this time around, just really getting reflections from my friends, because in the past, I think I've been like, I'm so intuitive. Like, I don't, I can just like go with my gut, but it's a little bit confusing in there because of all my experiences. So it really helps to have your reflection. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing so vulnerably about your experience, and yeah, and just this questions that are coming for you. I really appreciate you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I just wish that we could all, this is like what I'm talking about on the dates with him. And I wonder if he's just a little scared of me because these are the conversations that I just want to have with everyone in my life all the time. And I'm sure it's maybe not for everyone, but maybe I am looking for the partner who isn't scared to have these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can have compassion for him if that's truly what's happening for him, but you can always inquire. That's part of what we've been exploring in authentic relating, right? It's like you can always reveal your assumptions, and say, hey, like, look, I've been sharing all these things with you and I haven't heard much about you. And and to me that feels like, I make this assumption about you, right? That you're scared to show more of yourself or something like that. And I wonder if that's true, or like what's really happening for you.
I love that. It's so funny because when I'm in the context of dating, I'm in such a freeze sometimes that I literally forget all of my tools. And so this conversation is almost like me rehearsing so that I don't forget in real time, like what to say, like how to say things. Right. Well, okay. So even backing up to first, yeah, okay. And I think the physical, but there is something around the physical intimacy part that I want to bring up where, and he has said, like, he knows what I'm going through with the container and everything, and he's very much said, hey, you can say anything at any time with me. But I don't know how to explain it, but with the physical intimacy thing, like it's what I told you, but it's like, how do I tell him? Like for me, I just want to be like, yeah, I feel like you're so good at physical intimacy. It feels like you're just flipping over the emotional intimacy part, and it makes me feel like you're like way too smooth, and it makes me feel really suspicious. But how do you say that in the context, because like naturally my defenses are so up that it comes out as blame like that, or if I were to broach it before rehearsing like we are now.
Yeah, I would say, like, maybe something along the lines of, I noticed that I don't feel safe with you because,
What? Oh my God.
like, I noticed that I don't feel safe with you because I don't know much about you. And it would really help me if you would reveal a bit more.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so funny when you say that there's something that happens in my chest because it's so vulnerable. It's so like, I feel like there's tears behind my eyes because it's coming from that really little girl place, that feels so unsafe. And I think it's hard to say to the person that you don't feel safe with because you don't know if they're going to meet you.
And if they don't meet you, you have your answer.
Yeah.
And they have their answer, and so it's good for both of you to be clear. Oh, this is not gonna work. We're not compatible that way. We're looking for different things, you know.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious if you ever had like a weird phase of navigating this, because I think maybe if yeah, the fear of abandonment and rejection that's just kind of wired naturally from youth is there, but I'm curious if you encountered any of that.
The fear of abandonment, you mean?
Or rejection, for example, because in this instance, I'm fearful of being rejected. I'm fearful of not being chosen by this person.
Yeah, it's like for me, what's coming up is like I was in a relationship for 9 years in which that fear of abandonment was very strong. And it came to a point in the last phase of the relationship where it was literally like, you know, almost like it felt like he had to choose between me and his work and his career. Even though like there was ideas of how to make it work and whatever, like eventually it just felt a little bit like that. And I think throughout that relationship, even though I was not fully realizing it, I was in that please choose me position in all kinds of ways. In all kinds of ways, like I was feeling abandoned. I was like with this anxious attachment in the beginning. Like I was always the one calling and everything. And then I remember like we went through this shift. It took about a year probably in which I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stop calling. Let's see what happens with this relationship. And we broke up, and then we came back together. Like it was like a whole like crazy thing because I was like, I'm just not gonna initiate. And then there was all this space of like, well, nothing's gonna happen then. And it's like, and so little by little disentangling this like abandonment stuff and like all the challenges I had around that. It's been huge for me.
Right. So like in that relationship, there wasn't this type of conscious, like when you stopped calling, it's not like there was the conscious relating or authentic relating between you two.
I mean, like I did share with him the path I was on and that I was wanting to connect more with my feminine and to get out of this attachment style and all of that. It was several years ago. I don't think I used those words specifically, attachment style, but like I shared with him like that this doesn't feel like how I want to continue. And yeah, and initially he was actually very encouraging. It's just that his behavior did not change immediately, and so yeah, so it was just yeah, a difficult time. But I'm very grateful because today I feel like it's much easier for me in the context of dating, for example, to look at somebody and be like, you know what, like if they walk away, I'm happy they've walked away. It's like because if they were really meant to stay, like there's nothing I could do that could scare them away. And if they get scared away or if they give up, then good. It's like they're making space for someone that's more right for me.
I know. I feel like I've heard that for 20 years, and it's like this interesting embodiment journey as a woman of being told that your whole life and knowing it from here, like knowing your worth and they're not your person, right? And then every time going into dating, the physical somatic pain of navigating it is so real. That yeah, maybe that's kind of where I'm at now is I'm on the precipice of really putting that in action. Like almost being so I don't want to say scary, but wild that it's like, can you even stick around? And that's kind of the attitude that I want to have going in. But it's just interesting because I do feel like in my own personal work, I'm gearing up and I have that energy, and then I enter into the container of relating, and it just feels so different. It's so funny watching my body contract again and hold and forget the words and forget even how to navigate it. Was that Was that a learning curve for you? Did you experience that?
Definitely. Definitely. And, like, I feel every relationship has been different, but more and more, especially because of my work with authentic relating, I feel like I've gravitated towards people that value authenticity as well. And so there's been that opportunity to actually be with those sensations and emotions as they arise with each other, and to work through them together. you know I'm really proud of myself. Like, there's this, for example, this person that more recently appeared in my field, and initially I was very attracted to him, and because of some similar experiences I've had in the past, where it's like this big attraction, and and diving in a bit too soon, and then like experiencing all the consequences of that. I said, you know what, like, I only want to go in when all of me is in. I want to move deeper into intimacy, not only when my sexuality and my heart are here and are connecting, but I want my consciousness to be on the same page. And for my consciousness to be on the same page, I really need to get to know this person. So even though I feel this huge attraction towards them, I'm actually not going to act on it. And I'm actually going to sit with them. And I even showed him a little bit of authentic relating. And I was like, let's sit with this. Let's sit with what we're feeling. And like, just really trusting myself in my ability to hold those boundaries. And I'm very grateful I helped them, because of everything that I found out after. And I've been seeing, like, we're not compatible with that person.
Wow. You mean so it was like the attraction was clear on both sides and that was stated and present between you two? And obviously, he wanted to move in intimately. And when you say intimately, does that also even count like touch, like in cuddling or holding hands, or even, like a simple hand on the back? Because there's like different stages of intimacy too that I feel like women aren't taught. It's just expected that it's from 0 to 100. And is that part of it?
For me, like, touch is definitely something that has been delicate, because I haven't been so, touchy with my family as a child. So I know that I'm quite sensitive sometimes, especially when there's attraction. If it's a friend, of course, I'm happy to give each other a hug or something. But like, if there is attraction happening, there's touch happening that is, before I'm ready for that. Actually, it happened in that context, and I had to, like, several times, like, push it back. Afterwards, like, just realizing, oh, he reached out for my hand, and I'm like, oh, kind of sneaking out, and then, like, and then
Yeah.
afterwards, like, I write him, hey, this is what's happening. I don't feel like this is okay for me to be holding hands right now, and like, just in the moment, like you say, can be such a strong response, and like, not necessarily the context of, like, okay, let me sit down with this and tell you all about it. So it's been kind of like, sometimes I can't react on the moment. All I can do in the moment is like, oh, I feel like I don't want to be holding hands, and pull out. And then afterwards I can share what happened, unless he asks me in the moment, in which I can reveal. um so that's been there. And then in time, I would say that I opened more to, to just hug each other, or like sit next to each other and have a point of touching or something that's felt comfortable. But also because, like, I have felt more comfortable with, like, him knowing my boundaries and not overstepping them. Like, knowing, okay, so maybe I can be around you in that way, but like, deeper intimacy, I'm not open to with you right now. And so that, yeah.
Well, and this is that it's almost like, because we're so trained, I feel like in dating, most of the time is spent being flirtatious and getting to know each other, that how I'm seeing it is sometimes there is a more serious, not serious, but like a different context of time carved out to state things like touch, or, for example, bringing in a more authentic relating type approach to check in about where each other are at. For example, for this person that lives here where I'm at, yeah, like that it would kind of be like that, for example, because it's like in your, what you just shared, when somebody just reaches over and tries to take your hand without like, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way that we've been socialized, right? But for example, like I've been intimate with him and now it's like I'm second guessing it, or I have thoughts about it, then it is kind of like it is kind of on me to bring that up, I guess.
Exactly, it's their job. You know, it's the man's job to reach out and to initiate that, you know, growing closeness with the woman. I feel like, you know, of course everybody, you know, people could say that things are not so clear cut, you know, masculine, feminine, and the roles we have and everything. Of course there's all kinds of exceptions to that, but like for me, I just feel good receiving that kind of initiation from a man. And so then however I have to be in my feminine power to say yes or no to that, to hold my boundary if it doesn't feel right.
Right. And I think in the past, without understanding relating, I would have talked to my friends and been like, he's not even meeting me where I'm at emotionally, and he's already moving so far physically. I'm going to write him off now because all he wants is sex. But I think that I'm then jumping quickly to an assumption, and I haven't even spoken my needs, my boundaries, assumptions, or checked them.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that is on me. That's my
It's a
yeah.
dance. It's a dance, and it's like we can't expect, you know, the men to know what we need and what we're looking for and what feels safe to us. So it's kind of like every woman is going to be different, so it's up to us to know ourselves and to, yeah, have the courage to reveal the parts that apply to a certain situation.
And so help me, Zori. How do I bring up the slight discomfort or fear of, or yeah, the like, because we got to, I don't feel safe because I don't know you enough, or what was it? I don't feel safe because I don't know enough about you. Um, but how do I say that in terms of how we're progressing intimately?
What do you mean?
Like, because we are like intimately, we haven't slept together, but we've moved in that direction, and it seems like, you know, every time we progress closer to that, to now where I almost feel like, without speaking anything, that's expected, even though I think he's already said you can say anything at any time. But I want to be able to say something that highlights, I want to get to know him more, and I want to feel more depth of vulnerability, and that I feel a little uncomfortable that we've just continued to progress intimately without having more depth in the other areas.
Yeah, I really hear you. And I guess like a question I have here is what level of intimacy you are comfortable with the level of knowledge you have of him right now. And if that means you actually pulling out a little bit from the point you've reached and saying, you know what, I feel like I need to step back over here because like I feel this is the place from which I can feel safe in getting to know you before I'm ready to go back. And I'm sorry, like this is really, it's not about him. It's how you have been responding to his invitations. And if you feel that you have overstepped your own boundaries of how far you are willing to go there, it's just really owning that of like, I feel like I've done that. rather than, oh, you're doing this or we're doing this. Like, it's just kind of like bringing it back.
Yeah, I think in the past, the story would have always been you're the one leading way too far when we haven't been deep enough emotionally. But now, yeah, I think it is feeling a little bit of a desire to scale back, almost like a fear, or almost like for me, moving further, even though I thought that, I mean, in the moment, I think it did feel okay, but it gets confusing, I think, in the moment because of everything in the heat of the moment. And then now it feels like it's almost like old patterning of moving in that direction to find deeper closeness or in hopes of it leading to the deeper emotional intimacy, which I don't think is achieved through advancing. Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. I love the just owning that I may have moved further than I wanted. And I'm noticing that I don't feel safe because I want to get to know more about you and your inner world. I feel like I've shared a lot, and that is my desire.
Beautiful. How do you feel with that? How do you feel with that right now, saying that, feeling that?
It feels like I kind of want to cry. It's like every time I get to a place like this, it feels so simple, but there was such a block and a big wall up, to even get to say it. And to say it feels so easy, like there's a way through. um, yeah, like I feel like I can exhale, and I feel like now I just get to see how they respond, and it has nothing to do with being abandoned or rejected. I feel like I didn't self abandon, like I'm with myself right now by being able to get there.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Zori.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't realize this would turn into a personal session.
I didn't realize it either, but like I just really, really appreciate how open and honest you are and vulnerable you are with this and revealing in front of other people. And I feel like the world needs more of that, like just more of that vulnerability so that we know, oh, we're all navigating this and here's some other approaches, here's some other ways.
I mean, the more that I feel like I didn't come online expecting to almost like, I don't know what the hell I would call myself now. I feel like I've changed my title a million times, but now I think my title just says like authenticity, attachment, and trauma healing, the things that I'm really interested in. But navigating the online space and figuring out how to show up as a quote unquote leader, practitioner, teacher, coach, whatever, and going more, and like it requires us to be more in our authenticity, which ironically requires us to be more of a human. And so that's where it's so hard because we think that we're going to be more and more of experts, but we actually are just publicly becoming more and more of somebody who sits here like, I don't fucking know anything, and it's I feel like I have no choice but to lead with vulnerability because I don't feel like I don't have anything else going for me besides my interest in these topics and my curiosity to keep being authentic in them, which means, and that's why I'm so drawn to the surrendered leader in circling, which I actually think maybe we can talk about circling and authentic relating to give some context that I might put at the beginning of this conversation since we've talked about it so much. But Yeah, that's why I was really drawn to that term, surrendered leadership in circling, because I think, I don't know, it just feels like this is where the juice is. And I'd love to hear from your words how you would describe authentic relating or circling or your path or whatever you want to share in your world of what it is to you.
Thank you. Yeah, in the context of what we're exploring, I kind of feel like, authentic relating for me is a kind of a commitment to meeting the unknown with another, and a commitment to getting to know ourselves in that, getting to know that which we can know the most, which is like this actual human, and that we can sense, that we can feel. Okay, I have this body, I have these emotions, I have these thoughts coming. Like, these are the things that are the easiest to know, so let's know them and authentically share them so that we can really navigate the complexity of relating with one another. And yeah, my path with this really, it's been almost, I think it's 5 years and a half now, that since I first met this practice of authentic relating, and specifically circling, because authentic relating is a term that includes many, many different practices and ways of being with another. There's all kinds of authentic relating workshops that are more focused on play, or like on a more like fun way of getting to know each other. Um, that can also get deep and can get meaningful, but it has that more like, a little bit more of a scripted, like, let's do this, let's do that. Whereas circling is more of a deeper dive into an organic unfolding of the present moment, in what happens between us when we get together, when we sit together, what relational patterns emerge between us, and what happens when we watch them, not with the intention of healing them, of fixing them, of making ourselves any different than what we are, but just really watching what happens and trusting that.
Yeah, I love that. Right. Um, Thank you. I laugh because Zori and I, in one of the later sessions, Zori got to witness me as I spent 2 hours trying to get breadcrumbs of softness or affection or anything I could out of a man that was a very triggering archetype for me in one of our sessions. And I just watched myself, almost like the image in my mind would be with like a big ass shovel, just like working, shoveling, like working away at like trying to find some gold of when this man would accept me or show me some vulnerability and just kind of showed me my style of relating in partnership in a condensed 2 hour window, which was mind blowing to me because I walked away from that saying, I am so glad that that happened in a 2 hour window rather than another tumultuous 6 month relationship. And I don't have to break up with you. And I also don't have to spend 2 months winding down from that disaster either, even though I think every single relationship teaches us something. So I'm not saying, I was just appreciative that there was a container like this. And I also feel like this is a perfect time to talk about something that we're creating together. Yeah. So, from my fascination of circling and, my background of attachment healing, attachment patterns and trauma healing, I kind of come from the world where, of Western therapy, where safety is prioritized above all else in order to heal trauma. And then I also have a thirst for, in my work, I lead women through the depths of the underworld. How do we reclaim our rage, our sexuality, and grief as something that's not negative or something to be fixed or healed, but rather part of my full Kali, multiple arms self, that is so much part of my power, as much as my softness and compassion and vulnerability. And so I'm, as much as I hold the safety and beauty of that format of healing in a one-on-one setting, I've also always been drawn to containers. Like, my first experience really in a big group setting was Radical Aliveness, which to me had the flavor of circling, where I had a big group process where I was kind of moving through the first time of people seeing my internal rage and also processing this assault for the first time. But the context of that container was sort of like anything goes. Conflict is welcome. Like, our triggers are here so that we can dance with them and hold them together and be in that mucky, tangible tension together, and that there is a way through, and that on the other side of that, I love what you said, is sort of like finding myself by being with another. On the other side of that, it's like I found more of myself by being in conflict and being in a place that I would have otherwise avoided, because our society is kind of built on politeness and we don't go there. And so I think that's what I found through circling too, and seeing more of myself, seeing where I meet somebody else and what happens, and now navigating that through dating. And so I am really inspired to almost, and I brought this to Zori because I feel like we're perfectly at either end of the spectrum, where I come from that world of safety, and Zori is in this beautiful, alive, circling, authentic relating world. And I have this vision of having a container where we start with agreements and start with teaching people about their attachment styles, and actually teaching people how you can interface with different attachment styles within relationships. Like, just because somebody's anxious and you're avoidant doesn't mean it won't work. You actually can learn tools in relating to help each other grow and help love each other and move towards secure, which I find really beautiful. And also even just exercises like noticing, to begin to notice how you might say, if you are in an anxious attachment style, like that you may jump out, like, and immediately all of your attention and energy is on the other person and you kind of lose yourself. Or you might notice that you kind of tend to be disassociated and want to have distance from the person you're looking at in an exercise. So almost creating a container where I bring the awareness and the safety and everything that I've learned in this world of safety, so that we can kind of have that nurtured setting of like, we're all here for the same reason. And then slowly, as we get to like find more fullness through relational safety, almost open up to, I don't want to say danger, but I love the word danger, open up to more of the healthy conflict and the clunky conversations, the messier things, and getting to invite all of ourselves into the space, and then practice and witness and see how we make it through now with our tools and with a sense of trust and safety in the world. Because we don't live in a safe world. So to me, if the care stops at just safety, then we're expecting people to go out in the world and only find safe people to relate with. But what if we get to equip people with the empowerment that comes from navigating those clunky things and getting to the end of that? Then they get to relate. Like, the whole world is a video game, like every relationship is. And that's so exciting to me. And so that's kind of the context. I'm curious, Zori, if you have something to reflect on that.
Yeah, what I'm noticing is, first of all, just an appreciation of that same session of authentic relating, which you pointed to earlier, where you were like looking for those breadcrumbs of softness, of like openness in another. It really made me a huge impression in that moment. And I can only imagine what it's like been like for you in the context of relationships. But when it comes to actually creating safety for another, or creating safety even in a group field, I have a lot of admiration for you in the way that I saw you do it in real time in that context with this person. And then at the same time, as you say, like there's something, we have that safe space to learn some new things. But there's also something about meeting that clunkiness, meeting the unknown, going into a space that's not so much about safety, but it's about having courage to go into places that are not so comfortable, to go into vulnerable places, to be with conflict, to be with our triggers, to not let them, sit, okay, I'm going to deal with this later. No, like, let's bring it now. Let's see what's happening now. And kind of moving from this kind of exploration that's more like, reflective of like how I have been or how I would like to be in relating, into a space that's more about real time watching of how am I in relation with others, and really what is it that arises in that's outside perhaps even of my concepts of myself and my ideas of how I show up. And can I allow myself to actually meet myself as I am outside of those contexts, and like watch my body, get angry with something I would not think I would get angry with, but like that's what actually is happening, and like and move through that in a shared space.
Right. And yeah, and it's almost like I feel it's almost like we get to start with the safety, and then almost like we move into the second half, or the second whatever part of the container, which is where we then get to explore our instincts, and get to just be with them, knowing that we're all here. We've made these agreements in this container, that this is where we get to practice, right? Because sometimes it could be a little more volatile if we first start practicing these things with our parents, for example. It's there's not exactly that same context of we're in this container getting to be authentic. Because I actually think, yeah, I'm inspired by this because everybody's talking about how do I be more authentic, but it's actually pretty fucking scary to start practicing being authentic out in the real world first.
Exactly. And for me, listening to what's coming up is also like an acknowledgement that when we come into a container that somebody else is holding with an intention of making it safe for us to process some of the deeper layers that maybe we would not be able to access without that safety, there is that important step of, okay, I've done that, I've received that, and then can I move in another space where that safety is no longer something that someone else is holding for me, but it's something that comes back as my own responsibility of how I hold myself in this moment, right? So it's kind of, it's not that safety disappears. It's more like, oh, I take ownership of how I be, of what I experience.
Right. Right. And I feel like having intentionality around this container to get to have that felt sense of almost, I've got me, which is what I think we're all looking for. But sometimes it gets really confusing when we're in the context of actual real relationships trying to do that, versus a container that's created where we get to practice that. Because like in the world of trauma, we are constantly going towards the same relationships to complete a cycle that didn't get to happen in our childhood. For example, if I need my dad to make me feel safe or respond to me in a certain way, and I never got it, no matter what ways I tried to make him feel safe or happy or whatever, I'm repeating that in all of my relationships. But I may not actually be healing that or moving through or witnessing that in the same way I would in a container like that we're creating, because I'm so busy trying to get my need met in this relationship that when they give me those breadcrumbs, I'll think that I've won. Like, then I'm like, cool, and I never get to examine who am I anymore. Like, I don't even see that I've left myself. Whereas, like, for example, in circling or in this container, my hope is that people get to see that in a space that's almost removed from the heightened hormones and everything of being in relationship in real life, to get to really examine your own patterns, which I think is what's really valuable in this container.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of the Art of Relating podcast. If you want to learn more about creating connection without losing ourselves, Zori and I have an upcoming 3-month program on the art of relating. We'll be learning about how to create a secure relationship with ourselves, spirit, and others while staying true to our own authenticity. You can find that in the show notes below and on my website. See you next time on the Art of Relating.
My brother live in a jungle concrete, like a belly gone to rumbling. Only wants a taste of the sky. Wind and fire set in the seeds for the son of his son to come with him one day. Taste the roots he was born from. Passing the story how all hands came together as one.